Committee. This is the first ONS meeting of the municipal year. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the new team members. There's been a few swaps this time. If I could ask Ms Young for apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Bridgewater, Councillor Coulson, Councillor Hayworth, Councillor Moody and Councillor Wood.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is the confirmation of minutes from the meeting held on the 20th of April. Is somebody prepared to propose and second that they're a true copy of the meeting? Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Can't take yours, Councillor Southcote. You weren't on the committee, were you? No. Yes, you were. Yes, thank you very much. Sorry. Right, declarations of interest. If anybody has any declarations of interest, could you please either mention them now or when they come up in the meeting, please? Thank you. Item 4, items requiring urgent attention. I'm not aware of any. Ms Young? Mr Molyneux?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, public forum. I can't even see a member of the public, so I don't think there is any issue to be raised. Is that correct?
No, Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Right. Item 6 is the Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan, the 6-monthly update. This is Councillor Lynn Daniel and Mr Powell and Mr Adam Williams. Thank you very much. Who's going first? Thank you.
Thank you. The Council declared a climate and biodiversity emergency in December 2019, and a plan of action has gradually evolved and is still evolving. There is now a community forum of representative members of the public set up as a source of advice and scrutiny of West Devon's climate and biodiversity plan. The new hub portfolio of natural environment, along with its advisory group of councillors, will refine and work within the JLP and the West Devon Action Plan to ensure that we can achieve achievable results in the next 2 to 4 years of the Council. We'll also be setting some longer-term ambitions and a vision of how we can move forward into an uncertain future. Among the highest generators of carbon emissions in West Devon are housing at 21% and transport at 48%. We also have the 2 leisure centres, which are large producers of carbon emissions. And our biodiversity is in trouble everywhere as an unintended consequence of human activity. Devon County Council are about to debate and agree their interim climate and biodiversity plan. West Devon's plan will need to be allied to the Devon plan to achieve the greatest effectiveness. Our aim will be to look at what we can achieve across our region and starting projects that deliver measurable results. We'll work closely with Dartmoor National Park, who have their own climate and biodiversity plan, and other partners, and that's planned during August. Reducing carbon emissions and enhancing biodiversity are both areas that have a wide range of potential actions. So it's for the advisory groups to decide what we think we can do using the current climate and biodiversity plan, given the time frame and potential funding implications of this.
Sorry, Councillor Daniel, can I pause you a moment? They're not hearing you too well on the live stream. If you could, yes, as you've done, moving your
I'll move that
thank
closer.
you.
Okay, sorry. It'll be a fine balancing act because there's so much that is outside our area of influence. Government policy decisions and those made by neighbouring stakeholders could have crucial impacts on the things that we can do or achieve. Our carbon and biodiversity plan is part of a raft of changes which will affect everything that West Devon Borough Council do. The natural environment's not an island, it's connected to the whole, and we aim to work together. Carbon emissions will reduce, requiring a Team Devon approach for the most effective work. We've done really well within our own organisation to reduce carbon emissions and waste. We've assured our buildings meet high environmental standards and reduced the carbon emissions in council supply chain and procurement. We also contribute to Devon County Council's Citizens' Assembly on climate change. The more intractable issues, for example, leisure centre emissions, will need a Devon-centred approach for possible grants and guidance, and technology has yet to catch up to need in some areas, but we can't wait too long to take action. We've used the Green Homes grant schemes to retrofit older homes, and we need to try and produce more apprenticeships for skilled workers across West Devon, because these projects will be going on far into the future. West Devon has a lot of older housing stock, and some of these will be difficult to retrofit to meet current environmental standards, and it may be a case of doing the best we can now. Active Travel will be a West Devon Green Infrastructure Initiative. A West Devon trail joining villages and towns across our regions could be a future objective. There are trails already in existence and others planned. Joining these up would be able to form a coherent active travel route. It will not only give an alternative to car use, it will enable people to walk and cycle to enhance well-being, as well as bringing active travel tourists to the area. We will work with our partners to achieve this and bid for funding, and it would be good to get our local MPs on board with this project. There's potential for feasibility studies into electric charging points with associated solar panels in West Devon car parks, with a commitment to one in Tavistock and one in Oakhampton car parks. Variable charges for the most polluting vehicles could also be considered, although we know people on low incomes may find this onerous. But cycle parking in our car parks would certainly be something we would like to achieve. The grounds maintenance policy will be reviewed with a plan to introduce Devon County Council's verge management for biodiversity. This will ensure our green spaces become as biodiverse as possible. And we'll also be reviewing the motion passed in Council in 2019 with the aim to cease the use of chemical pesticides on West Devon managed land. We plan to find tree planting areas and voluntary groups that can utilise the Woodland Trust Free Tree Scheme, plus promote tree banking schemes. Local nature recovery schemes, working with landowners and stakeholders, also have the potential to increase biodiversity. Our plan is for a 10% increase in biodiversity in the next 4 years. A lot of work will be required to reach this target, and we'll need to reach as many environmental, voluntary and community groups across West Devon as we can. They've done so much good work, and a forum or network where advice can be shared would be achievable for us, and also any support that we could offer. Measuring biodiversity success could possibly be also considered for an online website. Waste management will also be considered as part of the organisation where we could make changes that cut carbon emissions. Public awareness campaigns and 3 weekly residual waste collections will be part of future plans. We need to reduce the amount of waste that's generated and recycle much more, for example, pet food packets. And we can achieve this with public awareness and education campaigns. There are many things that are outside of council responsibility, for example, biodigesters used in agriculture and food waste disposal. We could consider directing the public to an advice and support web page, but this may not be the most effective use of council resources. What we can do is to ensure that the biodigester we use at Holsworthy to process West Devon's food waste is maintained to a high standard, and perhaps ask for an annual report to be included within the waste management annual report. Up to 2019, the plant had had no accidental discharge for the previous 10 years, and we want to try and ensure it remains safe for the natural environment into the future. The future is before us, and the decisions we make now will shape our borough for the next 4 years and beyond, and we certainly live in exciting times.
Thank you very much, Councillor Daniel. That was a very comprehensive introduction to the agenda item. Mr. Powell or Mr. Williams, do you have anything to add? No? Questions then, please. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Is West Devon Borough Council, as a planning authority, doing its best to ensure that future development is fitting the biodiversity and climate change agendas for which we've signed up to. A point in question is, for example, I know it was planned, the approval was given many years ago, but in Crowndale there is no footpath for children going to school. So I've witnessed children having to come out of the new homes on the Callington Road development, and they cross the road twice, and the roads there are very busy, as is Tavistock in general. The traffic in Tavistock is dreadful, and that, I suggest, is as a result of the planning decisions which West Devon Borough Council as the planning authority has made. And are we really doing our utmost to reduce our carbon footprint in the planning decisions that we make? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I can't really comment on the kind of example that you talked about. It seems quite unfortunate. Pedestrian permeability isn't quite good on that site. But in terms of where the joint local plan is, obviously, joint local plan was produced a few years ago. So in terms of our climate emergency aims, it's kind of out of date in that regard. But I do know the joint local plan team at the moment are pulling together a briefing note about how the joint local plan review can respond to the climate emergency. So that work should be presented to the JLP board very soon.
Can I just ask, Mr. Williams, is that what was brought up at the JLP annual meeting and they've gone on from there? Because there is like a paragraph stuck on the end now, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
May I have a supplementary, please? Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, thank you very much. I would also ask then, is West Devon, as the planning authority, ensuring that developers in any new development put in the infrastructure before the houses are built? With relation to the Callington Road development, the footpaths don't kick in until there's several hundred houses have been built, and I think we really need to be more robust and ensure that developers actually put some infrastructure in. It's too biased on the. It benefits, I suggest, developers more than residents and our climate emergency policy and agenda. Thank you very much.
Did you want me to come back on that very quickly? Yeah, so what I can do is I can take that up with the joint local plan team to kind of make sure that they're considering pedestrian permeability and infrastructure in better ways than they are already. So I'm happy to take that conversation to them.
Thank you. I'd also like, we need to keep a close watch on this because we don't want anything to slip through. So I suggest, Chairman, that the Scrutiny Committee keeps a watchful brief on this.
Thank you very much. We will discuss that. Mrs. Daniel, Councillor Mrs. Daniel would like to come back.
I wanted to reply that the plan to have action trails across West Devon joined up will actually, I hope, alleviate some of the problems that we have with school children walking to school along narrow lanes and people trying to cycle amongst fast traffic. And that's one of the things I'm really quite concerned about, is road safety in our area. And I'm hoping that if we can get these joined up trails, that people will have an alternative to being amongst traffic and might alleviate some of the problems that we've got. But we really need to work towards it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Vachon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about biodiversity. How do you actually measure that? And what are the indicators that you will be using to know that you gained the 10% increase on that? Thank you.
So Rob Sakula is the officer who's looking after the grounds maintenance procedure at the moment, and from what I understand from discussions with him is we need to do a baseline study on our sites using metrics provided by the Department for Environment, Rural Affairs, and we can use that to gauge where that 10% comes from. So yeah, it'd be through the GM review that we'll be doing that.
For the benefits of those online, that was Mr. Williams who answered Councillor Vachon's question. Councillor Southcott, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about item 1.3 in the appendix. Review strategic scale solar, wind and hydro energy for both commercial and community energy development. One of the areas, certainly out where I live, has been very strongly against is wind turbines on land. And I understood that the government really was discouraging that now. So why are we pursuing this? I hope this is not going to reopen all the problems we've had with wind turbines in the area.
North Taunton, Councillor Southcott, are you thinking of?
Blue Down, Marystow, Lifton,
Thank you.
you name it.
Who's answering that? Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously renewable energy is quite an important part for meeting our net zero aims, and through the joint local plan review we'll need to consider where those sites for renewable energy might be suitable. So within the national planning policy framework, there is you're not allowed to build wind farms, for instance, without any sort of site allocation. But the NPPF also does make it clear that plans should consider identifying suitable areas for renewable and low carbon energy sources. So we'd have a duty to make sure that we understand where that capacity is as part of an evidence-based gathering exercise.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. What I'd rather see a lot more effort put into is hydro, but we'll come to that at a later date.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just add to that, it is purely looking at the capacity of the joint local plan area. There is no commitment to the council to proceed with any development of any sort on that land. It was discussed quite heavily at Hub. We've made further inquiries with the JLP to ensure that no decisions that this council should be taking are taken away as a result of that bit of work being undertaken as part of the JLP. Hopefully that gives you some assurance, Councillor.
3 hands shot up through that question. Are they all to do with that question, as they all shot up at the same time? Right, so if I could, was yours the same? No. So, Councillor Edmonds, please.
Thank you, Chair. Reference to the NPPF, paragraph 151, which Mr. Williams has referred to. I'm not splitting hairs here, but it actually reads, to help increase the use and supply of renewable and low carbon energy and heat, plans should consider. It doesn't say must. Now, as I said, I don't want to play with words here, but, is this something that we have to do, or is it something we may wish to consider? And if, I'd be grateful for confirmation of that wording.
So I referred to earlier that a briefing paper will be prepared for the JLP board, so it would be kind of appropriate to raise those sort of concerns through the JLP board. But in terms of the wording of the paragraph, when you get into the realms of shoulds and must, it's in an authority's best interest to make sure that any sort of plan review or local plan development should really consider all of the available evidence that you need to formulate your policies for that plan area. Any sort of missing evidence, such as renewable energy, could be seen as a source of weakness, and it could be an area for challenge for the authority if it weren't done.
Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah, thank you. But is that preceded by some sort of community consultation, or do we write the plan and then consult, or do we do this with the blessing or in the name of the community, or do we consult them after the event or at the time of a planning application for such a development?
Williams.
Yes, once we go through, obviously the bit of work that we need to do first will be evidence gathering to understand what the capacity is. And when we start, if we do end up moving into the realms of site allocations or looking at which sites are more appropriate for these sorts of things, they will be subject to consultation as part of a plan review.
Councillor Pearce, was yours on this subject?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is. Thank you. Councillor Edmonds has picked up part of what I was going to ask, but I think, Mr. Williams clearly wasn't aware of what we went through a few years ago with this. So, it's a very, very difficult situation to have the idea of having more wind turbines. And, I can see already the parishes where there'll be lynching parties waiting for him. I would like to ask, Chairman, that we have the figures provided to us for the amount of renewable power that is produced in West Devon at the moment. We have a number of wind turbines, quite a lot actually, for an area like us, and you can get the figures from Western Power Distribution because they are having major problems in dealing with the amount of power that's being produced in Devon and Cornwall due to their the limits on their main lines. And there was an article in the Westmore News not many weeks ago where they were having to spend £5 million, in excess of £5 million, in upgrading their main trunking networks. Now, it would be very interesting, actually, before we go down the route of identifying sites for further wind turbines, if we knew how much power was being produced in West Devon through renewables. And I would imagine it far outweighs the number of properties that we've got in our area. Thank you.
Mr. Powell, please.
If I can, Joe, just a couple of comments. I mean, certainly we can look at that through the Devon Carbon Plan, Councillor Pearce, in terms of capacity, and clearly the presence or otherwise of the infrastructure and the capacity of the grid would be key inputs to any applications. But I think we're possibly jumping further ahead of where we are with this at the moment. We've got an action plan here which members of the council adopted back in December. This is an action in there which really just takes something that is already occurring within the JLP process and puts it into here for completeness, because section 1 of the strategy is around energy. If members feel as though support of that work is something that they do not want to support, then it's within the members' gift to say we'd like to remove it from the action plan, for example. But I would say in this case that the communication around that issue would have to go through the JLP board. But just making the context here, we've got an action plan with a number of actions which we're developing, moving forward on. If members aren't comfortable with any of those, then obviously they can be removed from the action plan, subject to council making that decision. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Kimber, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got 4 questions. Is that okay? So I think it's very exciting to see all the items on the action plan, and our job is to note the update today. But I'm kind of confused by the action plan. I feel like it's constantly changing. Every time I read it, I feel like there's new things in there. I don't know what's in, I don't know what's out, I don't know what decisions have been made or not. I don't know who's making the decisions, how much they're costing. So my questions really are related to the background. At the beginning of the report, it says that the delegated authority be granted to the Director of Governance and Assurance to make revisions as and when deemed necessary. So my first question is, who's the Director of Governance and Assurance, and what revisions have been made, and is there a way to track the changes or the revisions since December?
I'll let the officer who is in charge of governance and assurance, Mr. Powell, answer your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the question. I'll introduce myself. My job title probably doesn't reflect my role, but there we are. The reason for doing the delegated authority back in December was simply to try and keep the action plan alive, as in things that come up that we've got an opportunity to engage with. Clearly, anything that involves additional resource or any budgetary implications would not be delegated to me in my role. What we try to do is highlight in red any changes to the action plan. So, everything we've done so far and actioned was within the plan adopted by members. And everything we've done so far is listed, is again within budget and within operational capacity. So, again, I think in terms of how this will progress, as members know, we've got a new corporate strategy coming along. We've got a new hub lead to cover this along with the natural environment, and there'll be an advisory group which will support the delivery of that work. And I would suggest that would be the best vehicle for updating and adding to or removing from the action plan. I would say that anything fundamental that needs to be removed would have to be a council decision. But minor additions around things where we can support and work towards the aims of the council, it would seem sensible to keep that authority, to basically just keep things moving forward and deliver the best outcomes. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. So I'm a software developer, so we deal with changes all the time. So the red text shows the changes since December, or are there changes before that?
As I understand it, I will defer to Adam, who maintains the document. But yes, the reds are the main changes, as far as I'm aware, to the since December.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, so the bits in red are new actions, and the column to the far right are updates on the existing actions that were in the action plan in December. We're in the middle of trying to find a better way of presenting this, but we're going to move the action plan onto the website, so there's a bit more of a live version of it there, so you can track what those changes have been over time.
Okay, thank you, because it certainly does feel like it's alive. So we scrutinise and challenge the suggestions through the advisory group, as I understand what you just said.
We have a community forum now of members of the public which feed into the action plan or give advice or scrutinise it also.
And that'll go through the same red text revision
yes.
process.
Powell.
Perhaps I could just add one other thing to this. The recent hub committee is in the report. The way that the action plan is presented was scrutinised, and suggestions were made that we could do it in a better way, which have been taken on board. So we will be reformatting this to, at the moment it's based on the strategy. You have to read it alongside the strategy to make sense of it, which is quite difficult. So we're going to do a sort of delivery plan that separates them into, among the themes, but into where we've got direct control, where we're working with partners, and where we're lobbying. So there's clarity over which ones we're committed to and how we're going to finance any of those actions. And the other areas which are in there, which are ambitious, aspirational, and where we're working with, for example, Devon County and the other partners on the climate emergency.
Thank you very much for your help.
Councillor Moyes.
Yes, on to 1.2, explore forming a non-profit green energy company. I was slightly surprised at the cost of in consultancy was 90,000. Has anyone got anything further on that?
Williams.
No, nothing since then. So that action's been in the action plan for quite some time. I attended a webinar organised by the Energy Hub to go over what sort of costs associated with doing this and other local authority examples of doing something similar. And yeah, that figure was the main takeaway from it. So whether we proceed with that is something we'll need to consider, and it might just be something we just leave.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I am referring back to a question that somebody else put earlier, which is about the ability for young children or others who are walking in a new development where the footpath isn't there. The suggestion was that we could amalgamate that with cycle routes, which leaves the children rather in danger, as far as I can make out. And this forward planning of being able to walk as developments expand does have to be there. And however much we would like to just say we have green routes coming up, we need specific actions for the different parts of the community. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, please.
Yeah, so with the again with the permeability on site for developments, this is obviously all something to do with the scheduling of development and what phases are brought forward at what sort of time, and even whether they're there to begin with. And obviously some of these things are dealt with through Section 1 to 6 in terms of the phasing, but it is something that we can look at to kind of make sure that those facilities are in there, because people should be able to walk around their developments and not have to encounter traffic on the road.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniel.
Regarding the active travel paths that we're planning, we did have a conversation about safety, and I know that sometimes they get very overcrowded because there aren't many of them. And places like Exeter, where they have very heavily used paths, have them divided in two. So there's one section for walkers and one for other forms of active travel to keep safely. And also there is signage as well, and I think that would have to be part of the plan for this path. That all paths across West Devon that we're planning. And these would be specifically for action travel rather than paths within housing development. So that would be something different. The pavements there, obviously, they do need to be in place because they're essential, aren't they?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Sellis, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I referred, as Councillor Moyes did, to 1.2. Are we duplicating anything here? Where's my question? Oh, come on. I want to know, are we working with Tamar Valley, for example, who do a great deal on biodiversity and energy, etc., and also, for example, the Tamar Energy Group, and also with the active travel. Will West Devon Borough Council be working with cyclists? This is a question I've raised at County, where we get cyclists to actually behave in a way which is safe. I'm not saying that all cyclists are bad, but I have an increasing amount of concerns from residents who have had near misses from injury and things like that. And it all sounds really dandy. Oh, we're going to have these active travel paths and it's all going to be green and wonderful, where in fact it's utterly terrifying for children and elderly people, people who are hard of hearing, the electric cars, all this stuff. If you are disabled, it might not be a visible disability. You know, what are we going to do with all this action plan? What are we going to do to ensure safety? And how much are we already doing with Tamar Valley, etc., and areas? Are we duplicating?
So I recently went to a community energy project webinar given by Devon County Council, and they are actively looking at having in community energy hubs around the area, and then they have had report done showing that these things are actually really beneficial for local areas, and they create a lot of good return for the investors. So it could be something the council could make money from and reinvest. But it also has a lot of economic goods, local spending, and indirect benefits. So I think, and that including reducing fuel poverty if you're generating energy locally. So I think that's something that I would like West Devon to look at seriously, to see whether we could possibly invest in something like that. And they have, Devon County Council have a way of creating these companies, which is you can use local businesses to provide. So I think that might be something we could be looking at in the future. The other thing regarding the safety on paths, I think you have to, as I've said, you have to, if they're going to be well used, we need to make sure that walkers and cyclists are separated. And in Exeter, as I said, where I lived and cycled a lot, that's what they do there, and it's really successful, and people tend to abide by that. And I think that's one way of ensuring people's safety. And as far as electric cars being quiet, as a driver of an electric car, I think you know they could do more. It does make a small noise at low speeds, but it could be better. And I have asked if that could be made louder. But I think that's something, when we get more electric vehicles on the road, something that needs to be considered for people that can't hear you coming. Thank you.
Councillor Moyes, please.
Yes, I was slightly shocked to see new action 1.7 investigate business rates reductions for farmers who wish to use land for renewable energy. I can probably cope with that along the side of motorways, but let's face it, Devon is a farming community. Is there any further on that?
Mr. Williams, please.
No, this is just a new action for us to investigate what that might entail. And we had discussions with an NFU representative not too long ago, and they kind of expressed an interest in some farmers wanting to develop some of their land for renewable energy, not just in this as nationally, but business rates do kind of off-put them bringing sites forward if they're generating energy above and beyond what they need on site. So again, it's just something for us to investigate, and we can consider what the implications of that if we decide to do anything further.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes. Councillor Kemp. Oh, sorry, Mr. Drew. Sorry, Mr. Powell.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think just again to reinforce, the action plan allows us to look and explore options. There will be no decisions taken based on the action plan. Any decision of that nature would have to come back to members, where we would generate a range of options, rather than, there's no authority or delegated authority to suddenly put in a scheme to reduce business rates for renewable energy on farmland. It's a scoping exercise. I think we have to keep in mind the two key aims that we've adopted in terms of energy. One is that as an organisation, we've committed to being net zero by 2030. So there's a lot of focus in the action plan on delivering against that ambition. And then there's a wider ambition of supporting and working with partners for Devon and the borough to be net zero by 2050. So a lot of these things, aspirational, partnership working, and they all feed into that mix of understanding what we need to do to achieve those aims. There will be a number of choices in the future which members will have to make, but we need to generate the options and the cost of any of those decisions in the future.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. Just a short point, because I do realise this is a big scoping exercise rather than about particulars, but there are many local areas where lack of footpaths is already an issue, and tiny towns, lack of footpaths, the idea it's filling up with cycles. This is going to be an ongoing issue, and I think it's going to need further discussion, but I understand this is not the place for it. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My next question is for item 2.10 on page 14, and as part of the JLP review, consider an Article 4 direction. Now, I see there's no progress there. Is that because you're waiting for the JLP to bring this forward? Because this Article 4 will also affect the Class E situation in town centres, and will give us some weight there in dealing with those. So, I think this is very important. Although it's a planning issue, it's in the list here. So I want to know why no progress is being made, and whether we can make a recommendation to the JLP board on this. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, please.
There has been no progress since the action plan was adopted in December, because what we need is, from what I understand from Phil Baker and our strategic planning team, is we need evidence that the Class Q provision in the permitted development rights is undermining our spatial strategy. And to do that, we need a few years of annual monitoring reports to be able to build that evidence base up to be able to do that in the first place. So we need a few more, at least another year or two yet of annual monitoring for us to be able to build that Article 4.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds, please.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to 1.7 raised by Councillor Moyes, perhaps instead of under point 2, where it's suggesting that they investigate business rates reductions for farmers who wish to use land for renewable energy, that perhaps a more positive way of approaching that would be to incentivise farmers to produce more food, which could be sold into the local economy, and by doing so, demonstrating and delivering real benefits to our environment.
Mr. Powell, please.
Yeah, certainly. They're different things, but achieving the same outcome. So clearly, again, if members would prefer to focus on that side of things, we can. I can't remember every detail of what's in the action plan, but certainly buying locally, producing food locally is a key part of any approach to reducing carbon and hopefully increasing biodiversity. So again, I'm not sure whether we've got a specific action in there on those lines, but we can certainly add one if that's what members would like.
Thank you. Nobody else has got their hand up for a minute, so may I ask a couple of my questions, please? Is there a date for the Devon plan being adopted so that other councils can dovetail with it? Do we know if there's a date yet, please?
They're in the middle of amalgamating all the consultation responses from the February consultation. I believe the last time I was told at the Devon Emergency Response Group meeting was we're expecting something around August time.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel, you mentioned in your introduction that you would be looking for more cycle parking in car parks. Did you envisage whether there would be charging for cyclists? Because that is going to cost money to put the cycle parking in. Would there be like a nominal charge for people to pay to park their bicycle?
I wouldn't envisage that there would be a charge for cyclists because we're trying to encourage people not to use their cars, to use other forms of transport. And I suppose that's something that we would need to invest in to think of that aim, that we're reducing as many cars coming into towns as possible, because as we know, it's caused huge amounts of congestion and it's getting worse with more cars on the road. So that's one of the aims that I would like us to look at, and certainly cycle parking in high streets and things like that we could be looking at too, so that people can have a safe place to leave their bicycles.
Thank you. I'm sure Councillor Edmonds took note there. That'll be at the Financial Strategy Review Group. And my other question, have we actually given formal commitment to solar panels in Tavistock and Oakhampton car parks? And which car parks would they be?
No, we haven't. We're just doing a scoping exercise at the moment to determine whether it's possible, what energy that would generate, and whether or not that would be something the council will work towards. So we've commissioned APSI to undertake a piece of work at this stage.
Oh, Mr. Molyneux, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back on your previous point, which I know was said in jest a little bit at Councillor Edmonds about the car parking. But the reality is most of this work will cost money, and members need to be aware that, there will be some serious financial decisions to be made around if they're serious about climate change. And I just wanted to reinforce that point, that this is all going to cost quite a bit of money ultimately, but it's a challenge.
That is why I did mention it. It wasn't in jest. It was to jest to Councillor Edmonds, because I know where it will go as I sit with him on the next committee, where it will go. But it wasn't, that's why I said a nominal amount. If it's 50p or £1 to park, they can park, pretty much all day or whatever. But I think, as you have said, people have to realise there is a commitment to this. Councillor Daniel has already invested personally with an electric car, and other people may have done as well. But that is an investment into, future energies and future things. And I think, cyclists should be expected to do a nominal amount. And if it's a child's bike, maybe not. But I do think we're going to have to find the money from somewhere. And as we know, as much as Mrs. Buckle is excellent at finding rabbits in hats and etc., we don't have a pool of money to be able to afford all of our aspirations. So, yeah, it wasn't quite in jest. And I know Councillor Edmonds didn't take it as jest. But it is something we have been talking about for quite a while on that committee as to how we afford everybody's aspirations for their, their departments. So, yes, thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
Well, thank you, Chair. And no, I took the point, and rest assured, we will consider all these items fully with fairness and openness. They'll be given the fullest consideration.
Sorry, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you very much. And just at the risk of sounding like somebody who maybe doesn't ride a bike quite as much as other people do, I do count bicycles as vehicles. They might be two-wheeled vehicles, but they do cause people strife, and they shouldn't be on the high street if it's a pedestrian area either. And if you're perhaps looking for a place to put a bicycle park, you shouldn't be thinking of it in the middle of people, you should be thinking of it in the middle of the other vehicles. That's just a personal point, but I would like perhaps a bit of balance in this. Not that I'm criticising anybody on either side of the conversation, but there are people who do get rather worried about bicycles on pedestrian areas.
Last point. Councillor Sellis, please.
Are we in debate or questions? Because I have something I would like to say rather than a question to ask.
Just go for it, everybody else has.
Right, well, just carrying on from what Councillor Kemp was saying, the tailbacks of vehicles are frequently caused by cyclists who use the highways rather than the many cycle routes which have cost the taxpayers millions of pounds. Devon can boast some of the best cycle paths and tracks in the country, I'm advised, and I do think that we have to be very careful because if we provide cycles, secure cycling parking, that comes at a cost to the taxpayer. And I was able to use some of my locality budget for some bike parks in Tavistock, which was great. I was really happy to support that. But I do think we have to be very mindful that we represent all people and not just cyclists. So I know that I get, as I've said before, an increasing amount of people who are very, very fed up with cyclists and their behaviour. Only last week there were about 30 cyclists, middle-aged men, cycling the wrong way of one-way street in Tavistock, and I said, "Oh, you careful, because there's blooming heavy traffic coming the other way, just near the banks, around the roundabout." And busy crossroads, and I said, "Oh, it's one way," and they said, "Yeah, no, love, we're only going one way, aren't we?" He couldn't give a toss, So unfortunately, cyclists have got quite a lot to. I know that not all cyclists are like that. I know I've got friends who are avid cyclists, but please, we do need to be very mindful.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis, was it Sunday you saw them?
I can't remember every day.
Because there was a race on
no,
Sunday.
No, it wasn't the race. No, I'm not that daft. No, they all stopped off. And fair dues, I think they all bought an orange juice in a cafe or something, so spending money. So that was great. But no, it was another day.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moyes.
Yes, a fairly general thing. I can understand that not this committee, that committee, seems to think a certain issue is a very good idea. But can I emphasise the fact that everything has to be thought through very, very thoroughly. Don't just go off because it's a good idea, but look at what that could cause in other directions, because the two could conflict badly.
Thank you. Councillor Spettigue.
Thank you, Chair. Cyclist here. Just for balance on the discussion, there are some really badly behaved cyclists on the roads. I agree with Councillor says, and there's no doubt about it. These are the actions of individuals, though, and obviously, shouldn't reflect on the that type of road user. Full stop. Facilities to lock up bicycles, if they are just metal bolted to the ground. Yeah, they're not free. They're not overtly expensive. Putting in a charging system for them would be profoundly more expensive than just installing them. And actually, the benefit in terms of climate change and biodiversity of getting a car off the road is really, in respect of this topic, is a win in its own right. So I would be keen to see more facilities for people to lock their bikes up. Yes, not in the middle of the high street where people are walking, but it's not a complicated issue for me. If there are more places to lock up bikes, more people will ride bikes.
Thank you. Has everybody had their say on this item? Councillor Samuel, I think you might be the only person who hasn't spoken. Oh no, there's a couple. Do you have anything?
I'm taking it all in. I'm taking it all in. No, I mean, I'm really encouraged actually to see point 2.3. I might be going into discussion. That's why I'm holding back, because it's not really a question. But it's just really encouraging to see about the better bus provision. I know we've just got the Levelling Up Fund that's in at the moment to try and get that underway with the Campton train, and it's really encouraging. My question, I'll turn it into a question, is are we working with public transport in order to try and get a joint up thinking with Devon County and with West Devon with regards to the buses? I know we need to try and get that working more effectively to try and get people within Tavistock and Northampton. So my question really is, what are we doing in order to try and get that joint up working?
Mr. Williams, please.
So this sort of work's being led by the placemaking team. I don't know if they've been having discussions with any bus providers, but I imagine it would have to be a Team Devon approach, because we can't consider this sort of work in isolation. We don't have much control over where bus operators operate the buses, but we do need some sort of strategic oversight about where bus routes are underserved at the moment, where they could be better served.
Thank you. I will move the recommendation. Mr. Pearce, you were a question or a comment? I
was wondering whether we were going into debate, because we seem to be coming out of debate. Thank you.
So, Kimber, are you happy to second? Thank you. Right, moving into debate. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will start first of all with the issue of the footpath, which Councillor Sellis brought up, and her question was not answered. The footpath from the Callington Road development, which was going down to the school, was put in, or the idea was put in place nearly 10 years ago when the outline planning permission was granted. And if I remember correctly, it was to be implemented when 50% of the development had been built. And it was unfortunate the way that was done. And I have to agree that there are times when infrastructure should be in much earlier when development takes place. I mean, by the time we get to half the build there could be quite a number of children that are having to walk around the main road, the A386, which, as you all know, is a very busy road. So that is something which, was decided a long time ago in today's terms. As car parking comes under my portfolio, I want to pick up on 2.1 and introducing or investigate the introduction of differential charges for parking permits in car parks. Now, to me, this is going to be horrendous, and I certainly would not support it, because you are penalising the less well-off in our society in West Devon, because it's very evident from what is happening that it's the more affluent people that are buying electric cars at the moment. So you would be penalising the more vulnerable and the poorer residents within our community if you have a higher charge for diesel and petrol vehicles against the electric ones. So I could not support that in any shape or form. I think that's all I've got to say at the moment, Madam Chairman. I think I made myself quite clear earlier on, so I think officers know where we're coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Would anybody else like to make any comments, please? No, we're all done. Councillor Sellis, please.
Thank you. Just following on from what Councillor Pearce said, I agree with him. And I think we also need to remember that a lot of our farming community have heavy cars, and equally a lot of our tradesmen and workers have to be very careful how we do this.
Thank you. The recommendation is that Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the update on the Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan. I think we have given Mr. Powell and Mr. Williams an awful lot to think about. I don't think Mr. Williams' hand has stopped working during this meeting. So a lot of these comments will be taken on board, and I think the plan comes back again in another 6 months. Right. If you could explain the timeline for how it comes back, please, Mr. Powell.
Yeah, certainly. It will come back to overview and scrutiny in 6 months when we'll have a new set up in terms of the action plan. And in the meantime, obviously, the advisory group will be supporting the hub lead as we go on with the adopted corporate strategy.
May I just ask then, if this report is coming back in 6 months, will any actions actually have taken place? Because we can keep talking about this forever, but we need to be actually doing some actions. And you can have another little column on here that says doing, done, ongoing, if actions have started to take place. Because, this action plan, as we've already seen and Councillor Kimber brought up, is constantly updating itself with changes where things aren't feasible at all and things like that. So, I think we need to be able to see that work is actually taking place. And I know specifics will go, as you say, before the hub and before council. But I think we just need to be able to see within the formatting of the action plan that we are actually doing something.
If I can answer that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope you can see from the report, the content of the report, that a lot has been done. But as Mr. Mooney said, and you've alluded to there, the decisions around investment are going to be decisions that will come forward on the basis of us doing the background work. The other point to make is the work needs to be targeted against the maximum outputs in terms of savings of carbon or increase in biodiversity. So another piece of work which we've listed in here we'll be doing is looking at carbon budgeting. So working out, we know what our carbon footprint is as an organisation. We'll then need to say, okay, if we do measures X, Y, and Z, we'll be at this position, and will take us down to a residual amount of carbon, and therefore, what are the other options we can put in place? It's a huge subject. It's very complex. The interdependencies, which members have pointed out today, are really important. And I can assure you that certainly as officers, we won't be recommending going forth on any particular direction of travel without having considered all of the potential implications for the wider community of such changes. So, plenty of work to do, but we'll report back in the way that you suggest, Chair.
May I just ask a further point? Back in 2019, when we first decided as a council, we were going to appoint a climate change specialist. It was alluded to I'm going to have to be delicate, which is not usually easily for me because I'm just blunt and honest, that the role would fund itself through grants that could be applied for. So, is that happening, please?
I can answer the question at the moment. Obviously, we have an officer in the room. At the moment, that hasn't happened to date. We're still looking at those options in terms of what we can bring in from a finance point of view. We use certain amounts of funds from our Green Homes grants to support delivery of that programme. So some of the work we're doing is funding the resources to do that. then we have another year to prepare a business case for continuing the employment of the specialist to deal with climate change. So that'll be something we'll be looking at, and we'll come back to members with options in the future.
Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, following on, I didn't really get an answer about the Tamar Valley and Tamar Energy and the companies which are already doing an awful lot. Are you linking with them? Just for clarification, just to bring it out for transparency.
Mr. Williams.
Better? Okay. Yeah, so with regards to Tamar Energy Community and Transition Tavistock, those two groups have members on our community forum, so we actively discuss things with those groups through that, and obviously we have quite good working relationships with tech as well, so we have individual conversations on those bases. In terms of Tamar A&B, that's a relationship I'm keen to kind of get going soon, and we've also I've also reached out recently to the climate lead at Dartmoor National Park Authority as well to join up there.
Councillor Sellis?
Yeah, thanks, because we do have an officer who does an immense amount of work with Tamar Valley. So I hope that you are in dialogue. And, you know, when you were just relating to how it was going to self-finance and that, Madam Chairman, you know, we just have to be really sure that you, as a scrutiny committee, that we are absolutely sure that officers are working together and that there is shared dialogue and that we're not reinventing the wheel and we're not duplicating, and that we're getting it's efficient, effective and value for money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, thank you everyone for that debate. That was really, really good and lots of questions asked and answered. If I could move to item 7, rural broadband, verbal update. Now, I don't know whether Mr. Molyneux has it, but I did get an email from Councillor Cheadle. Oh, can you vote on whether you note the previous report, climate change? We just normally note. Yeah, thank you. That's all right.
Thank you.
And I think he said Councillor Crozier had been brought up to date. Is that correct, Councillor Crozier?
It is indeed.
So you can do this verbal update, please.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
I've got a little bit of good news. The mist is slowly rising on the broadband issue. We're very fortunate that West Devon and South Hams have been awarded a project funded by the LGA. 5 councils have got this to monitor the broadband rollout by the various companies involved in it. In our case, we're dealing with CDS, Connect Devon and Devon and Somerset, and Airband. Airband have got the contract to deliver fibre to the home in West Devon, Torridge and North Devon, I believe. And we're going to be getting the maps very shortly to be able to identify the properties which do not have high-speed broadband. We've also, Rick was on the call yesterday, Councillor Cheadle was on the call yesterday, and he explained to the new officer, Gemma Bristow, who's taken over this role of monitoring, that in his instance, there were about 15 properties in his locale which weren't even on that list that had. So where BT gets its figures from, I don't know, but there's probably a lot more properties there which do not have the connectivity which society demands, and hopefully they can all be connected in when they roll it out. We know about the Sydenham Damrell project that's going forward. There's a project just starting in Buckland Monacorum later this summer, and I believe Beerfarers will be after that. But when it comes down to other areas within the borough, there will be ward councillors who will be in the forefront of making sure that their residents all get super fast broadband,
because you have the local knowledge, along with the parish councils, to identify these properties. And with that, I will close that report. If there's any questions, I will either note them or answer them.
Councillor Kimber.
Thank you very much. You said it's up to the local ward members. I have a resident who's got 40 properties all ready to go. Who do I approach to get that moving?
There's a lot of schemes being offered, a lot of work's been done already, but until airband, they're trying to do it in a logical way. The ones that are most forward, I believe, are going to progress, and the situation is all thus. We all want it tomorrow. One of the things I probably should add is, if you take on this contract, and most people will, I think, the price of your broadband is going to go up. You're going to be locked into a contract for 2 years, and but that's a small amount to pay, really, in order to get this high-speed broadband. Secondly, if you're an owner-occupier, it makes your house a lot more valuable, having high speed, especially if you've got people moving down from areas which already have high speed.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, please.
Thank you, Chairman. That's very interesting, actually. Good news. But I'm just wondering whether the properties that get their service from Cornwall, who live on this side, on the Devon side of the Tamar, whether they were going to be upgraded as well. And some of those did fall in the Sydenham Damrow parish, or do fall in the Sydenham Damrow parish. But there are quite a few properties from the border, running down the Devon side of the Tamar. So I'm just wondering, what's going to be happening with this, because, we've had a lot of communities, and there are other communities as well. I mean, if members remember, I did a poll or a survey last year of parishes, and we've just got nowhere with some of them. It's just been a nightmare. So I sincerely hope that those areas were identified then will be coming forward now for help to get connected with what we've been told now. Thank you, Chairman.
So, Crozier, did you wish to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. You're talking principally about Goalworthy, and they are actually surveying that now, I understand.
Councillor Pearce, could you use your microphone, please?
Sorry, Chairman. The area is from Newbridge at Gunnis Lake on the Devon side, right down to beyond Milton Abbot, where all those properties, or there are a block of properties all the way down through there, at Horsebridge and Wilmariah, and then going right down through, which receive their phone line or their broadband, or both, from Cornwall. And unfortunately, because they were on the wrong side of the river, they didn't get the upgrade when Cornwall did all theirs several years ago now. So I'm just hoping, there's a number of good quality businesses that are really struggling now because of their in between, especially with the Sydenham Damrow ones, because they weren't allowed to be included in the upgrade there.
I think the answer to that is, I've noted it, and I'll keep an eye on it. I'll ask the right questions at the right time.
I've got a very funny feeling Lifton fell into that argument as well, didn't it, Councillor Edmonds, at the time years ago?
No, we don't get ours from Cornwall. We've got our own green cabinets now. So the village, I think, is quite well provided for. But we would be very interested in any future updates and whether we fall into this proposal. But I don't think ours. I'm not sure, but I don't think it comes from Cornwall. But I may be wrong on that. But if we do have an opportunity to upgrade, I would like to speak to Councillor outside of the meeting, just to see if we're perhaps going to be on that list. And I'm thinking of also, you mentioned Milton Abbott, but I've got Kelly and Bradstone, areas like that that certainly do need to be picked up under these new initiatives.
Thank you. Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Chair. We're talking about fibre going into the hubs, I presume, or is that actually going into the individual houses, properties? In which case, who's actually paying for that?
Your grant will pay for that. If you're a business, you'll get £3,500, I understand, and if you're an individual, I think it's £1,500, which goes towards the project. Most of the projects are, I won't say all the projects, but most of the projects seem to be self-funding.
Okay, thank you. Does that mean that people have to apply for these grants to who?
Well, when a scheme comes into your area, Airband will contact the parish council and the local councillor, or I will presumably have knowledge of it, and then becomes a partnership between ourselves and Airband to make sure we get the scheme rolled out. Because that's the best way for it to work. Because otherwise you get individuals moving into the area. You know, for example, I'm still finding houses on the Beer Peninsula, which I didn't know were there. Local knowledge is, supreme at the end of the day.
Thank you. I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Crozier on in one meeting has picked up a pretty good overview of what is the black art of community broadband. What I would say to Councillor Vachon's point is that it's not clear-cut. There's numerous different schemes, and there's government schemes, there's the CDS schemes, there is the universal service obligation, and Gemma Bristow, who's the officer that's been appointed for this, her job is to make sense of all those schemes and see what fits for those communities. And it may be bidding into the government fibre scheme. It may be that she's looking at, as Councillor Crozier said, looking at the mapping to see where fibre broadband is going to be installed already. So her job is to take the requests from the community groups who express an interest in better broadband, look at all the different streams of data in terms of where that fibre is being provided from, where that super fast broadband or ultra fast broadband is being provided, and come up with the best solution and help that community tackle that minefield of all those different options that are available and out there. So that's the role that Gemma, who's been in post 2 weeks, will do now she's up and running. So I hope that helps members. And what I was going to suggest is I'll ask Gemma to put together a bit of now that she's in post, a bit of an update on her plan in the members' bulletin. So either this week or next week, just so that she can introduce herself to everybody. And then I would suggest as well, Chair, if we invite the officer along to the next overview and scrutiny meeting and she can do an update in person, if that's all right with you, Councillor Crozier.
That would be wonderful, thank you. Councillor Spettigue, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Councillor Crozier or Mr. Molyneux. Probably should already have asked this, but who decides the figure and what is the figure of downloaded megabytes per second, which is considered to be an adequate standard that we're trying to meet for people in rural areas? Perfect, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Councillor Crozier. Oh my God, he's going to become a nerd. Thank you, Councillor Crozier. The next item on the agenda is task and finish groups, and at the moment we don't have any. On the ONS work programme, which is on the back of your agendas, last page. I can find it. There it is. So our next meeting, we are due to have Devon Home's Choice. the annual overview and scrutiny report. And it looks like a key strategic partners that are being invited to the meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Molyneux?
Bear with me, Chair. I'd lost the document. So the partners that we were going to invite were Dartmoor National Park and South Devon AOMB. So that would be Tamar AOMB, wouldn't it? So they're the partners that we were going to invite.
Okay, thank you very much. And another one that we've been asked about inviting is Devon County Council with regard to traffic congestion in our towns and particularly Tavistock at the moment. If we could invite along Councillor Stuart Hughes, who is the Cabinet member, then perhaps he can explain a lot of decisions that are being made. Does anybody else have anything else that they think that we need to be looking into for scrutiny, etc.? Councillor Kimber.
Just while Councillor Stuart Hughes is here, would it be good if he talked about Oakhampton and what the plans are at the same time?
That would be very good. I'm not sure if that still falls slightly into Councillor Davis's brief. Perhaps Councillor Sellis could answer that.
What's it relating to? Councillor Davis's portfolio is transport.
That's what we're talking about, the Oakie Rail.
Yeah.
That's what. No, hang on a minute.
You said highways, didn't you? If it's germane to highways, then it's Stuart Hughes.
Yeah, it's just
transport is and transport and waste is Councillor Davis's portfolio.
Okay, have we got that then, please? If we can invite him along. During the year, is there anything else that anybody would like to see that we should be scrutinising? Councillor Musgrave, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just conscious there's been a lot of publicity recently over the rail partnership, the rail connection with Beer Alston and etc. And I wondered whether it was possible to get an update from the relevant parties as to what is happening on that front.
Okay, we do have it usually as a standing item on the agenda. It seems to have disappeared this time. The Beer Alston link to Tavistock, and also the cycle path comes into that one as well. Councillor Hughes could update us on that section of it, but with regard to the railway, we could ask Councillor Davis if she could send a forward, or if they wish to join us by Teams for our next meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave. Right, that was just a few head scratches then. Okay, everybody, I would like to thank you all for this meeting. Councillor Crozier has just left. Oh, sorry. Samuel.
Sorry, just had a thought. We've talked about how quite a few of us are quite concerned about the speed around the area. I'm just wondering whether it might be worth us asking the Police and Crime Commissioner to come and to give us an update, if that's quite possible, within this next year.
Right, we can note that one down on our list to plan it into the year's agenda. You okay with that, Mr. Molyneux? Right, thank you.
Yes, Chair.
So as I started to say, thank you all for your attendance. I would really like to congratulate very strongly Councillor Daniel and Councillor Crozier, because they have certainly got the grips and everything else of their brief. They have done really well today. They've answered questions and they have known what their brief is in a very short period of time. So thank you both. I know Councillor Crozier's left, but if somebody passes on the congratulations to him. Thank you all for such really good, detailed questioning of our action plan that we can move forward with. And I close the meeting at 3:20. Thank you very much, everyone.